Hey everybody, it is Saturday afternoon and I'm finally feeling motivated enough to get in here and start doing some work on the Waterfall Tank. I'm not going to focus on the actual tank so much today, maybe we'll get to that later, but I'm not really setting my sights on that right now. My goal is to get in here and start cleaning the actual waterfall part of it up. I don't think I'm going to mess around with shooting video throughout the process unless I come across anything specific that I want to get out there. But I do want to get a baseline of what we're dealing with and just give everybody a look at where we're starting today. And we're starting with a mess. You can see all the junk and crud I got in here. And there's a lot of stuff back here. That's all rooted in. I've got some rocks back here. You can see this big rock sticking out right there, so I don't know what the root situation is like. And again, if I get in there and we find out that the roots have really grown down in through the rubber and everything, and we can positively identify that's causing the leak, maybe we'll check that out a little bit. But I got to get rid of all that junk and get all that pulled out of there. I've got stuff up in the top section that needs to come out, a bunch of rocks and stuff, and then this dead nettle up here, and that's the name of the plant, dead nettle. I'm not saying that it's a dead plant. That is actually sitting completely free and clear of the waterfall itself, as is my geranium right there and my arrowhead plant. Now this arrowhead plant has a lot of aphids on it, and it's really big and probably seriously root bound in this small pot that I've got it sitting in, but it too is just freestanding. So this is going to get removed. I'm probably going to cut it way back. You can see it's got aphids on it. It's got a lot of aphids on it. And I'm probably going to take it outside and spray it where I can really spray it with something that I don't have to worry about getting in my fish tanks. I don't think I'm going to spray it with the pyrethrins. I have actually damaged sensitive plants with pyrethrins before. I don't know if that would be the case with this one, but soapy water will do just fine. But I can make it proper soapy water. Maybe even put a little neem oil in there or something like that, and we'll be able to get rid of the aphids on that. I'm also probably going to cut it way back, so when I do bring it back in, it'll be a lot smaller, and we might even be able to set it down, on the fish tank itself. Don't know if I'm going to keep the piece of wood or not, but that's something down the road. We can figure it as we go along. And then, of course, my Rex begonia here I do want to save, and it's getting really, really tall and leggy, but I don't know what I'm going to do about, I don't know where I could cut it back and save it. If I cut all these off, I can actually make cuttings of all this and reroot these, but what would happen down here? Would I get new growth, or would cutting it off just cut it off? So I don't know. We'll have to play around with that and see what we can do with my Rex begonia there. And then lastly, we'll see about whether we ever get to actually doing anything in the tank. The next thing the tank's going to have done is a really big water change and physical cleaning. I'm going to try to mechanically remove as much of the cyanobacteria out of there as I can, and then we're going to do a big cyanobacteria treatment on the tank and go over that in detail and so on and so forth. So there is your intro. As I said, probably not going to get a lot of this process done. Just going to be mucking it out and cleaning it up and getting all the junk thrown away. But if I do come across anything really interesting, we'll have a look at that. In the meantime, I'll say sit tight, and I will see you on the other side of this, and we'll have a look at what I got done today. All right, everybody. We are at an intermediary stage, and I think I was wrong about the roots growing through into the rubber. There was a chunk of arrowhead plant that was right in here, and when I tugged on it a little bit, it was really difficult to move, and I thought for sure the roots had gone through the rubber and had rooted into the back. But what it was I had laid a big rock in there, and the rock was sort of wedged in there, and when I pulled on the roots, it was just sort of wrapped around and growing onto the rock, and I was sort of trying to pull the rock out flat rather than long ways, and it was just sort of locking it into place. So that had nothing to do with it growing through the rubber in any way, shape, or form that I could tell. Every bit I picked up just sort of lifted off. It was sort of dried to it and stuck to it, but nothing gave me the impression that it was through the rubber. So I'm not really sure where we were actually getting the leaks from. So the next step is going to be to just try to clean it up a little bit. I'm not too worried about what's in there. It's all just natural dirt and debris and leaves and stuff like that. The gravel and the sand will either stay in the, where it is, or any of it that does get washed into the tank down here will just get cleaned up by the filter, so that's no big deal. And then any of like the leaves and the little debris like that gets in there will float, and I can just skim that out. I've already skimmed quite a bit of it out of there. You can imagine the amount of mess that I made when I was cleaning all this stuff up, and how much of that actually got into the tank before shooting this. So here are some of the rocks that I pulled out of there. In fact, this is all of the rocks that I pulled out of there. I have a use for these two right here. Possibly this one. We will see where they end up later. This is a good rock. I really like this one. It's got that nice cavity underneath of it. That makes for good structure, good habitat, and it's just a good looking rock, but it's really big and heavy. So I don't think we have any need to put that back unless I want to have something in there to simply disrupt the water flow, to give us a little bit of, a little bit of texture as the water flows down. Maybe just have a big rock in here for something to look at rather than just empty space. But I think we'll be able to do it. I think what I'm going to do is get it cleaned up a little more, and then we are going to fire it up and just have a run and let it go for a little while and see what happens and find out if it starts leaking again. If it does, shut it down. All I got to do is let it dry out, and then I can repaint it with my rubber silicone paint that I can make. It's easy to do. I'll show you how to do that in an upcoming video. So if you'll notice down here, the frame and structure of the waterfall is actually just screwed. It goes down here, and there's an arm that comes forward on either side of the tank. It's just a 2x4, and in this case I've got a piece of wood over top the 2x4 so that I can put plants on it. But that 2x4 is just screwed down to keep, it basically keeps the waterfall from just tipping over backwards. But that is just freestanding once I unscrew 4 screws. So what I might do is do that and actually remove this from the tank altogether and get it cleaned up, and then we can have a look at what the tank looks like freestanding without having a waterfall behind it. Well, I'm going to do that if I have to do that. I don't really want to do that, but I could do that. It's fairly easy to do. I would just have to then manhandle the big waterfall structure there around. So let me tinker around a little more, get ready, and then I will try to get the tripod set up, and I'll get it on video when we get it fired up for the first time, and we'll have a look and see what it looks like with the water flowing again. Alright everybody, I don't know where we left off, to be honest with you. It is now Sunday afternoon, and I've gotten back in here and started doing a little more work. Last night I did a really big water change and gravel vac. There was so much mulm and just gross stuff on the bottom of this tank. I really cleaned a ton of that out. I got the glass cleaned up, and we can actually see into the tank a little bit now. But what I just got finished doing was cleaning out the waterfall. I just remembered that I've got a shop vac, and so I got in here, and instead of just letting all that stuff flow, I vacked out as much of the loose stuff as I could, and I scraped, and I got a bunch of the crud out of there. But I found something that I think is interesting. For one thing, the roots are sort of grown to the plastic all over the place. You can see clear evidence of what I'm talking about right there. So, could some of that have penetrated and gone through that rubber? Probably. I don't know for sure, but it's certainly possible. I'm looking right here. I can see a couple little spots that almost look like they're pinholes that have bored through. But what I really noticed was up here. Look at this. The vac caught that and just started peeling it up. You can't tell me that's good. So it's entirely likely that this basin up here is where I had my leak. And of course, right there is my intake hose. Or inflow hose, I should say, whatever. You know what I mean. So I've got an idea, and I'm going to go ahead and get started on that. And then we are going to come back in here, and I'm going to make sure I get the pump working and all that kind of stuff. And then we're going to get that water flowing again. And as I said, I'm probably not going to put any plants or anything in the waterfall proper, but I can get some stuff propped up around it. I did do some cuttings and made a few adjustments to some of my other stuff yesterday too, so we got lots to talk about as this quite lengthy video progresses. So sit tight, and I'll see you for the next stage. Alright everybody, bit of a letdown, but this is what I wound up doing. I thought I had some pond liner, and in fact I used to. I looked everywhere for it, and finally after about a half an hour I'd made my way out to the shed. I remembered I attempted to use it to cover my kayak over the summer, and I wound up cutting it into a bunch of pieces so it would fit over my kayak. It never did work, and I wound up just throwing it all away. So what we're left with is a garbage bag, but it'll serve its purpose. I'm not worried about how it looks so much, as long as it doesn't let water get through into this basin up here. As long as it runs out that end and starts flowing through the rest of the waterfall, we'll be fine. So I've got the pump hooked back up. It's connected to the hose. All we've got to do is plug it in and get the water flowing, and I did adjust the flow on the pump to about 1/3 of being wide open, so it should have a significant flow, but it's not going to be like a rushing river or anything like that. So let me put you on pause for half a second while I get you on the tripod here. Alright, so that should get you a view of it started while I get it plugged in, and then we'll go ahead and pull the camera back off the tripod once it's flowing. Find the plug that goes to. Alright, there we go. Alright, well that's a bit splashy. Might have to prop that up a little bit to get it to... Nope, that's going to still be a bit splashy. Alright, now it's just flowing through here. Well, that's the idea, is to get it to go over that end, but apparently over time this end in the middle here sagged. The idea was for a little bit of water to flow across this. I have no idea what that purple stuff is, but it's really cool looking. And it didn't turn purple until it got wet. That's interesting. I don't know. I'll turn the pump off here in a moment, and we'll do some more experimenting with it, but I think over time this area right here just sagged, and it's now allowing most of the water to flow across right here rather than out this end. So we'll see if we can't do something about that. Look at all that purple everywhere. It's crazy looking. I'm guessing that's some kind of cyanobacteria or something like that. That is really interesting, the way it has turned purple once it's gotten wet. And it doesn't look that purple to my eye. I can see the purple in there, but it doesn't look like that, near the way it does on camera. So, alright, I'm getting wet. The basement's getting splashed everywhere. I'm going to shut this down. Hang on, we'll see what we go from here. Alright, everybody. Success at last. Well, temporary success at least. What I wound up doing was simply taking one of the rocks that I had already removed from this tank, and I lifted up the plastic and I simply put it down inside there and then laid the plastic back on over top of the rock. You can see how the plastic doesn't actually even cover the entire basin anymore, but that's okay because I have it way up in the air now. And then as far as this end, the water was just shooting off and it was hitting here and making a lot of splashing and whatnot. So putting that stick, which I just pulled right out of this tank here, that gives this water something to basically flow onto, and it just makes it go right on down there with minor splashing. So I don't even think I need to turn the flow down anymore. I don't want to turn it up anymore either. I think we've got nice vigorous flow. I've got that waterfall sound. I used to hate the sound of running water. It always made me feel like something was leaking somewhere, and I was always half in a panic trying to come in here and figure out where all the noise was coming from. But I gotta say, since I shut this down, it's just ominously quiet when I come into the fish room now. I'm just so used to having the sound of a little babbling brook and a tinkling waterfall that it's, you know, it's actually become quite a comforting sound. So I'm glad it is back. Don't know how well this is going to last. I'm already starting to see one little issue where the fork in this branches, it's causing the water to sort of splash up and off of that, and occasionally some of those splashes are coming all the way out and hitting the carpet, and it's also going down here, and I really kind of want to keep this area dry, so we'll have to, you know, tinker with the few odds and ends here. As far as around the back, if it is going to start leaking, it'll take us a little bit of time to figure that out. It won't show up immediately. It has to basically weep in through all of this expandable foam. You can see this is the cheap stuff here. This is the great value, or whatever it's called, the good stuff. Great stuff, that's what it's called. This is the really cheap stuff, and you can see how big and loosely packed, you know, it is. This white stuff here is the Loctite foam, and this stuff is really dense. So it's a lot more expensive, but if you're going to use this as like a construction material, the Loctite stuff is the way to go. That's hard foam right there, whereas this stuff, I could just shove my fingers through it if I wanted to. But it still takes a while for that water to start weeping through. Wherever it's going to weep through, it's got to soak all through all those little pores and make its way all the way down until eventually it's dripping out here. You can see there's a little bit of mold under there from where it's been wet in the past, and then of course it eventually drips down here. And I've got all my catch basins and trays and everything, so if it does start leaking, no problem. It isn't going to cause any issues. It's just going to be something I'm going to have to turn the waterfall back off, and we'll have to try again. Sorry about all that light. What I'm trying to show you is that just black duct tape is what I've got holding the trash bag in place. So again, not a real complicated fix, just something to get it up and running again. That's all I'm concerned about, is just seeing that little bit of water flowing, and then, you know, hearing that splashing and everything. So we'll get to what I did with the plants and everything a little bit later. Basically, if you remember way back when I was talking about that huge Rex begonia that I had sitting here, gave that a good old whackety chop, very low down. Hope that's going to recover. And then I'm going to make cuttings of all of the pieces I cut. So even if the original root mass and everything does die off and doesn't send out any new growth, I'll have 4 cuttings of that should grow fairly vigorously, and we'll have more of that Rex begonia here in the very near future. So I'm going to wrap that up for this video and say that is a successful early test run. We've got it going again. All right, everybody. I threw some plants and stuff in there before the video was even finished processing, so I'm going to go ahead and tack this little bit on as a bonus rather than an update later. We'll just go ahead and add it to the end of this video. And you can see I just took some of the rocks, I put them back into place, I moved that stick, so you can see it's interacting with the water a lot more, and it's giving me more sound and visual appeal, just a little more depth and character to the waterfall. Likewise up here, I've done the same, not only putting this rock here that sort of prevents the splashing, but you can see the water sort of gurgling up in here and flowing. I've actually got another rock behind this one that's keeping it from sliding out this way. So there's another rock down here that, as this water comes in, creates a lot of churning and bubbling and so on and so forth. So I get really good vigorous agitation and stuff in there, as if, you know, I actually needed it anywhere else. I've also put a rock right here. I removed that stick and put a rock right there, partially to hold the liner in place, partially to interact with the water. The water was just sort of shooting off, you know, almost in a stream, so the rock actually helps to deflect it downward and drag it out, slow it down a little bit. I also put my filter back on the pump, so the water is flowing a little slower than it was before, and that's made it a little less splashy. So now I think we're at a good place for the water. And all of the plants you see are nothing more elaborate than just some water Sprite I've grabbed out of a few tanks here and there, a few of my grow out tanks, and thrown them in there. They'll float, and the roots won't try to grow into anything, and it'll just be some floating greenery, and it can get as big and bushy as it wants. If it dies off, it dies off. I don't really care, but for the time being, it gives me something green to look at, and it brings a little more life to this waterfall. And you can see right here I do have one piece of Java that I threw in there, and I got some other bits, you know, here and there. I got some Anubias and stuff I might throw in there, and we can, you know, by springtime this thing will probably be lush and green again. Who knows? I'm definitely thinking about tucking something down into that little nook right there. The only problem is that will absolutely guarantee water will come out of there, and we'll start getting this side of it wet, and dripping off into the tank, and that might be where it's leaking from. I don't know. You can see we are getting a few drops here and there. It is moist over on this side, and we probably eventually will be getting, you know, a little drip coming down over here or something like that. So I don't know. So far so good. It's been running for maybe an hour now, and there's not so much as a trace of moisture in the back. So again, I don't know how long it would have to run before we start seeing any leaking. I also changed the filter pad in this filter and turned the flow way back. I'm eventually going to remove that filter and just take it off altogether, but for the time being it's fine where it is and it can stay there. I can also keep my plant on top of it, and in fact we can do that right now. Stick my geranium back over there. And now you can't even tell there's a filter over there. It's just a little bit more green. And while I've been tinkering around over here, I got in there and cleaned out the filter on this tank too, so we've got some good vigorous water flow. Some of the water sprite that's up there where we were just looking came out of this tank, and I scooped some of the duckweed out of this tank too, just to try to get it out of there. And unfortunately, since I pulled some of the stuff out of that tank, I've got duckweed in this tank again now. Even though I had finally gotten rid of it, I've got it back in there again. So that's what you get with duckweed. You never quite get rid of it, but it's no big deal. There you go, everybody. I'm going to say again, make sure you're subscribed. You don't want to miss anything I got coming up on my reborn waterfall tank rather. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you real soon.